Hi there, I'm Laura Dougal. I'm a parental return to work coach and I support people through their return to work after having children. And I'm very lucky today to have Becky with me, who is going to share a bit about her experience of her own return to work and what it was like to receive some support at that time. Becky, do you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Becky. I am a first-time mum. I returned to work approximately 5 months ago, and I am a senior fundraising manager at a charity called Money Ready.
Thank you very much. And we're going to dive in basically. So we started working together. You'd already returned. You returned to work at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Um, and then we started working together about sort of 2 or 3 months in, I
Mhm.
think, to your return. Do you want to just talk a bit about how your return had gone and how you were feeling about it at that time?
Yeah, I think I had a bit of a mixed bag of emotions around sort of returning to work. I think when I first came back, there was an element I felt like I had a bit of me back again. There was a bit of time to do something. I think I realised how passionate I was about the work that I do. Was great to be able to reconnect with my team, and I was very fortunate in the sense that I returned to a team of predominantly working mums, so I felt like I was in a pretty good safe space there. But I think I definitely struggled. My organisation had been through a lot of changes, a rebrand and a merger, so I felt like I was coming back to almost a different organisation, but pretty much with the same immediate team. And so there was a lot for me to get my head around. I think coming back to work part time was difficult because I'm just someone that does as much as I possibly can in the time that I have. And I was still probably trying to squeeze 5 days worth of work into three and a half. And that was very much my choice. But it's a hard thing to do because you then have another full-time job to go into the evening when I picked my daughter up from nursery and she wants all of my attention. So it was definitely a challenge for me to be able to balance those two parts of my life, I think. And so I guess that's where we kicked off our conversations around, how do you do that? How do you manage to be almost two different people at the same time? Because I had my work self and I had my home self, and there's a bit of a blur between those at points, which can be hard to manage. You have a hard day at work, things are difficult, and you suddenly have to go and be softly, softly with your little baby at the end of the day. And I remember us having a conversation about I felt that my daughter deserved the best of me and my whole self. So whatever had happened, you have to shut your laptop, you have to walk away and try and forget about the fact that you've got these emails to send and this task to do and all of this stuff that you really want to scribble down on some note paper. Because she doesn't care about that. She doesn't even know what an email is. So she doesn't understand why mummy's just sitting and thinking, staring off into the distance and making a to-do list in her head. So yeah, it was a bit of a tricky return, but I was very glad that we then had the opportunity to start talking.
Thank you so much for sharing. I've just written down a few things that you've said because there's so much I think in what you've shared. I think that first part around returning to a team of other working parents, that I think is huge in itself.
Yeah.
Because I work with people who are the only person who has
Mm.
had a child in their organisation sometimes. So that sort of I'm quite interested in that difference and what that did for you to go back to a team of people who were they in a similar situation in terms of children's ages? Were they a bit ahead of you? Like, how did that, let's just start there. How did that affect your return?
Yeah, most of them a bit ahead of me. My colleague that had actually taken my maternity cover role was much closer. So it was really good to be able to connect with her, and I empathized with her more, I think. So I was her line manager before I went on maternity leave, and then we were peers when we came back. And that was great, but I was able to sort of reflect on her experience and go, God, she started at the organisation when she'd returned from maternity leave. And I was like, how did you do that? You really did come into a brand new organisation. It's a big change. So I think in some ways that brought us closer, which was really nice. But I think overall, it meant that people probably checked in on me more because they were like, yeah, it's a challenge. It's hard. How are you feeling? How are you finding this? My line manager was incredibly supportive, where, she'd always said to me, two things stick in my mind. One is that no one is more efficient than a working mum, and I completely agree with that. I think I was slightly offended by that before I had a baby myself. I was like, I'm really efficient, but it's in a different way. It's not meant to be derogatory towards anybody. And the other thing she always has said is that the most important things in your life sit outside of work. And by that, she does just mean your little family. And so I think coming back to be able to work under someone that understands that meant the world to me. And she'd definitely keep me in check when I'd sort of go, oh, I've got this, this, and this to do. And it's really important, I'm just going to work a little bit late to get this done. And she'd challenge me on that about my priorities and how much does something really need to be done right now. So yeah, I found that really useful. And it definitely made me think about having been a line manager for a number of years myself, how I've supported people going through that journey and that return to work and how we can do it better as a wider organization, because I do think it's a really vulnerable time. You're trying to find yourself. There's an expectation from people generally, you're back to work. So you're the exact same person as you were before, and we can just jump straight in, and you're not. You're a very different person. Your perspective on the world and work has changed hugely, I think. So yeah, it's good to come back to a team of working mums, working parents, but I definitely think there's more work to be done for everyone to be able to understand that, because there are some people, as you say, that come into teams that don't have that, and that's a real challenge.
Yeah, it's such a difficult thing to describe, isn't it? Because I relate to that. That's why I do what I do, because before I was a coach, I worked in HR and
Mm.
managed other people's return to work, but I hadn't had a child.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't understand what it does to you as a person. So I really, really relate to that. Thank you for sharing that. And just on what you were saying is about going back to work as well, because I know that you've worked for this organization for like almost 10
Yeah,
years,
it's
I
nine
think.
years
Yeah.
this year. Yeah.
Yeah. So even going, and this is something I hear a lot as well that I think is maybe just not understood, of
Mm.
like, even if you have worked for a company for, that's a good chunk of time that you've worked there for. And even then, it doesn't feel like going back. I think people think like I'm just going back to
Yeah.
work. We call it this return to work, which is an interesting choice of work
Mm.
because it's not really a return. It is going into something completely new.
Yeah.
And I know from working with you and from what you're saying there as well that your team had changed. There was a lot of changes going on. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I probably had the expectation that I'd just go back and just be able to get on, and I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm really confident in my job. And then I think I almost did have that crisis of confidence where even sort of basic tasks, I was like, oh, is this how we do things? Is this right? Do I remember how to do this properly? Systems change, and so it's like, okay, well, I don't know how to do that particular thing anymore, and so you have to go and ask someone, and that's hard sometimes, where you're sort of going, really sorry, mum brain, I've just come back from maternity leave, and I don't actually know how to do this anymore. I don't remember. That can be really hard, especially I think when I've been at the organisation for so long, because sometimes people are like, well, you've done this, and it's like, yeah, but you do forget. Even the ability to find different things on Teams, I'm like, oh, how do I do that? Didn't spend a lot of my maternity leave on Teams, funnily enough. So you do forget, and there's updates to things. So yeah, I think there's that sort of expectation that you can just come in and get on and know what you're doing, and you've done this for so long, it must be second nature to you, and that's definitely not the case. Having been at the organisation for as long as I have, before I went on maternity leave, I think I knew everybody pretty much. I hadn't met everybody, we're a national team, but I think I pretty much knew everybody. And suddenly I came back and I was getting emails from people, and I was like, I don't know who you are. I'm not sure what region you work in. I'm not sure on your job role. And you spend a lot of time having to make those introductions to people again. And then sometimes you're in meetings with people and I pipe up about something, and you can see people that don't know me sort of going, why is she talking about that? Because they don't know my history within the organization. They don't know other roles that I've had, and so my team would sometimes mention me and say, oh, you can go to Becky about this. And people are going, why? Why would I speak to Becky about this? Which I completely understand, but it's a bit unnerving, really. It's sort of like, oh, I feel like an imposter. You don't know me, you don't know why I'm here, you don't know what I'm doing, you don't know the work that I used to do before. And that can feel really, really strange and unsettling. And it can feel a bit isolating as well, which is a hard thing to manage, I think. It can almost be a bit of a lonely journey coming back because I think you feel that no one quite understands your personal position. I was very lucky in the sense that my daughter settled into nursery really quickly, really well. She made the transition a lot easier for me. I know some of my friends, their children didn't settle as quickly and, they had to take time off very soon and I didn't have that experience. But it's still a hard thing to navigate. And even the anxiety about your baby sitting there and going, I've got this email to send, but I really just want to check the nursery app and see if she's eaten, if she's slept, what photos I've got of her. And yeah, balancing that is then hard.
Yeah. And I think what I'm hearing you say there is even with the best team, even with the best child going to nursery, there are it is a transition. There are challenges
Mm.
along the way. What are your thoughts then about the timing in terms of when we started working
Mm.
together? If we were to start again, would you still do it in the same way? Would you request it sooner or later? What do you think?
I think at least one session before returning to work could be really, really useful to have someone to talk to about those anxieties about going back to work. Before I returned, I think there were points where I was like, I feel ready. I think I can do this. And then I think you just go through that cycle of sort of going, no, I'm not ready for this. I don't want to leave my baby. I don't know how to leave my baby. So I think having the opportunity to speak to someone like yourself to be able to vent some of those anxieties. I said to you in our sessions, a listening space is so important for me. It's something that can really help me. And I think being able to start that earlier would have been really, really beneficial just to sort of reflect on what's happened over the last year or however long you've taken and just talking to someone that understands what that transition really is like. Obviously, you speak to so many people. You can share that actually you're not the only person worrying about this. You're not the only person that goes through these thoughts and fears and worries. Can just sometimes stop you feeling quite so alone, I guess.
Totally. When you said that before about even with other working parents at work, I still felt isolated. I still
Mm,
felt like no one really gets what's happening to me.
yeah.
And I think there's so much in that I
Mm,
see in coaching scenarios where there's a real thing in coaching about not sharing personal experience and around not allowing people to find their own answers, which I completely agree with.
mm,
And I also think in those moments when someone's like, I don't know how to do this, or I'm feeling so alone, to be able to say, I spoke to four other people this week and they all feel the same way. It's just like
exactly.
I see it in people where their shoulders drop and it's like, oh,
The
okay.
relief. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not the only person. I think it's really powerful. What do you think? And I know you said there about having a listening space, because I know that everybody uses coaching sessions in a completely different way. What do you think was the most helpful thing for you about coaching sessions?
I think that listening space, I think I said to you in the beginning when we talked about what I wanted, I almost said like a bit of a therapy space so that I can come to my own conclusions about things. But there were definitely times in our sessions where I was like, right, I'm going to run through all of these options. And I definitely remember just sort of throwing information at you and just working through, so that I get to a point and go, okay, I'm a bit clearer now because I've just had that space to get everything almost out on paper and look at it. So I think that was probably the most helpful, and also speaking to someone that isn't directly involved in my organization, because you don't know the people that I'm talking about, you don't know the situations that I'm talking about, and so there's no sort of judgment there. There's not someone to sort of say, well, actually, if you'd have done this, you don't know my job role sort of inside out. So yeah, I found that really good to have that safe space, and I felt that I could really tell you how I really felt about something. Whereas I think if this was within my own HR department, for example, I might feel a bit more guarded about perhaps sharing exactly how I feel, because I think you want to present yourself in the best possible way to your organization. And I think for someone like me, I find it really hard to admit when I'm feeling really vulnerable. I think I came back to work and wanted everyone to see me as sort of very capable and very able and just able to sort of get back on and do what I needed to do. And I was able to share with you that maybe that wasn't necessarily the case. And I could project this persona out at work, but how I was actually feeling was maybe very different. So it was good to have that opportunity, I think.
Thanks for that. And there's so much I could say, but I'm going to hold back because that I really believe in that as well. That it's so you get so much more from it if it's somebody that doesn't know your situation and you're not feeling like you're burdening them with anything and all the things you just said. So if you were talking to somebody who had been offered return to work coaching and they were a bit on the fence or like maybe didn't know what they were going to get from it or how to use it, what would you say to them?
Give it a try. Give it a try because what's the worst that can happen? It's speaking to someone in a way that suits you. And it might take you a session or so to sort of work out exactly what it is that you want to get from it. But the worst case scenario, it's a bit of a chat about returning to work and your experience. And it gives you a good opportunity during your workday to talk about your baby, which is most new parents' first thing that they want to talk about. And that's okay too. There are these two parts of you, I think. And so just having a space to be able to try and work out how these two parts work together, I think is really valuable. There's no right or wrong way to do it. So what's the worst that can happen?
Thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we end this conversation today?
I just can't believe how quickly the time's gone, I think is the big thing. But I guess that in itself is something that I found quite useful about our sessions. It wasn't as if they were set up so we had to have a session every single week and then you end up with a very short term period of support. You were really flexible around timings between sessions and what was going to work. And I think I found that really useful because you evolve and you change a lot as you settle into work. If you'd spoken to me in my very first week back at work versus now, you'd see two completely different versions of me because my fears and worries about things are very different. The things that I feel more confident with are completely different. So I guess you as a coach get to see lots of different versions of new parents, new mums. And I think that helps as well because you go on that journey with them and just help people to feel a bit less alone in, like I said, something that can be quite an isolating journey. So yeah, I think it's been really valuable and I think everyone should have the opportunity. And even if you only have one or two sessions, that's okay. Not everything is for everybody, but it just is a really great opportunity for people to try.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your time
Thank
today.
you.